In the 5 months since Gus Lamont disappeared, his family had initially only released one photo of the missing 4-year-old. Gus's parents said, "We are united in our grief and we are united in our search for answers about what happened to our little boy Gus, who means everything to us. Our lives have been shattered and every moment without him is unbearable. We know someone out there may have information. If someone knows what happened, we are pleading with that person or anyone who may have seen or heard anything to please come forward. Even the smallest detail could give us the answers we so desperately need. We also want to express our deepest gratitude to everyone involved in the search for Gus. The tireless efforts of police, emergency services, ADF personnel, volunteers and specialists have meant more to us than we can ever say. To the friends, family and supporters who have shown such compassion, concern and assistance during this heartbreaking time, thank you. Your kindness has helped carry us through the darkest days of our lives. All we want is to bring Gus home and understand what happened to our beautiful boy."
I think I saw what happened that day. I don't want anyone to come for me or my family. What I saw close to the house was bad. It's in the house. The voice is quiet, shaking, almost whispering. According to recordings that circulated online in late 2025, the woman speaking claimed she had seen something disturbing near the Lamont family homestead on the day 4-year-old Gus disappeared. No names, no explanation, just one chilling phrase: "It's in the house." Months after 4-year-old Gus Lamont vanished from Oak Park Station in South Australia on September 27, 2025, the case appeared to have gone quiet. But according to reports cited by Australian media outlets, a woman believed to be connected to that mysterious recording has allegedly contacted South Australia police with information. And if what she says is true, the answer to one of Australia's most haunting missing child cases may have been inside the house all along. I think I saw what happened that day. I don't want to have anything to do with it, please, but what I saw close to the house was bad. I don't want anybody to come for me or my family. It's in the house and it wasn't a good sight at all. What you just listened to would become one of the most unsettling pieces of audio connected to the disappearance of 4-year-old Gus Lamont. In the recording, a frightened woman claims she may have seen something disturbing near the Lamont family home on the day the child vanished. The clip spread quickly through online forums and true crime communities across the internet. But there was a problem. According to public statements from South Australia Police, the authenticity of that recording has never been officially confirmed. Which means, the voice that shook the case may or may not belong to someone who truly witnessed what happened that day. And yet, the fear in her voice was difficult to ignore. To understand why that short recording unsettled so many people, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to a remote sheep station in South Australia. September 27, 2025. According to South Australia Police, 4-year-old Gus Lamont was last seen playing near the family homestead before he suddenly disappeared. In this story, we will examine the timeline of that evening, the 3-hour delay before police were contacted, the resident at the property investigators later identified as a suspect, the mysterious disappearance of another man just 1 day earlier, and the strange audio that surfaced months later. Because the deeper investigators looked into the Gus Lamont case, the stranger it became. If Gus's story matters to you, take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe. Sometimes the smallest action keeps a missing child's name from being forgotten. Oak Park Station sits deep in the South Australian outback. According to reporting from ABC News Australia, the property is a vast sheep station surrounded by open land, red dirt, and long stretches of isolation where the nearest towns are many kilometers away. It is the kind of place where the horizon seems endless, and the silence can stretch for miles. On the afternoon of September 27, 2025, that quiet landscape was the last place 4-year-old Gus Lamont was seen. According to South Australia Police, Gus had been playing outside near the family homestead. Like many children his age, he had found a small dirt mound near the house and was climbing and sliding down its loose soil. He was wearing a distinctive wide-brimmed gray felt hat, a detail investigators would later emphasize in public appeals for information. At first, nothing about the afternoon seemed unusual. The weather was typical for the region. The property was calm. Gus was close to the house in an area where family members could normally keep an eye on him. Then, sometime around 5:30 p.m., according to statements provided to investigators, Gus's grandmother walked outside to call him in for dinner. But when she looked toward the dirt mound where he had been playing only minutes earlier, he was gone. There was no sound, no cry for help, no sign of a struggle. Just open land stretching in every direction. According to information released by South Australia Police, family members began searching the immediate area themselves. They checked around the homestead, nearby structures, and the surrounding land, hoping Gus had simply wandered a short distance away. But as minutes turned into an hour, and the hour stretched longer, the situation became more alarming. Then came a detail that investigators would later examine very closely. Police were not contacted immediately. According to reporting from ABC News Australia and statements from South Australia Police, authorities were called at approximately 8:30 p.m. That meant nearly 3 hours had passed since Gus was last seen. In most missing child investigations, those early hours are considered the most critical. They are the window when search teams have the highest chance of finding a child quickly, especially in remote environments where temperatures, wildlife, and terrain can become dangerous. For investigators reviewing the timeline, the delay raised immediate questions. Why wait 3 hours to call authorities? Once the call finally reached authorities, the quiet isolation of Oak Park Station changed almost overnight. According to South Australia Police, what began as a missing child report quickly triggered one of the largest search operations the region had seen in years. Emergency crews, investigators, and volunteers began arriving at the remote sheep station as darkness settled over the outback. Through the night and into the following days, the search expanded rapidly. Helicopters moved across the red landscape, scanning the ground from above. Drones equipped with thermal imaging cameras were launched to detect any signs of heat in the surrounding bushland. Ground teams spread out across the property, walking slowly through the rough terrain, carefully checking every patch of scrub and every dry creek bed. According to ABC News Australia, hundreds of people eventually became involved in the operation. State Emergency Service volunteers joined police officers and search specialists, forming long lines that moved across the land meter by meter. Specially trained cadaver dogs were also brought in, capable of detecting the scent of human remains even in harsh outdoor conditions. One of the most important resources in the search came from experienced Indigenous trackers. According to reports from Australian media, these trackers are often able to read subtle disturbances in the ground that others might miss, identifying faint tracks or signs that a person may have passed through an area. Even the Australian Defence Force was called in to assist with the massive effort. But despite the scale of the operation, the search teams kept running into the same troubling reality. There was almost nothing to find. No clothing, no toys, no hat, no clear trail showing where the 4-year-old had gone. Days passed, and the massive operation continued to sweep the property and surrounding land. Then investigators discovered something that briefly raised hope. According to statements from South Australia Police, searchers located a single footprint in the dirt roughly 500 meters from the Lamont family home. At first glance, it appeared small enough to belong to a child. But as experts examined the mark more closely, uncertainty quickly emerged. Investigators could not confirm that the footprint belonged to Gus. Wind, loose soil, and the movement of search teams had already disturbed much of the ground in the area. The print was incomplete and difficult to analyze. According to police updates reported by ABC News Australia, forensic specialists were never able to link the footprint directly to the missing child. And that left investigators with a deeply unsettling possibility. If the footprint wasn't Gus's, then where did he go? For nearly 3 weeks, the search around Oak Park Station continued with an intensity rarely seen in missing child investigations in such remote parts of Australia. Search teams combed through vast stretches of outback terrain. Volunteers walked long lines across dusty paddocks and scrubland. Helicopters continued to scan from above, while drones and tracking teams searched areas that would be difficult to reach on foot. But as the days passed, something troubling became clear. The search was not producing answers. According to updates from South Australia Police reported by ABC News Australia, after about 20 days of extensive searching, authorities made the decision to scale back the large ground operation. The official explanation was practical but difficult to hear. Investigators pointed to the harsh terrain surrounding Oak Park Station and the extremely low survival odds for a 4-year-old child exposed to the conditions for that length of time. The South Australian outback can be unforgiving. Temperatures fluctuate dramatically, water sources are scarce, and the land stretches for kilometers in every direction. From a search and rescue perspective, officials said the likelihood of finding the child alive had significantly decreased. But the decision left many observers unsettled. In many missing child cases, especially those involving very young children, large-scale searches often continue for longer periods. The sudden reduction in search activity raised quiet questions among members of the public following the case. And there was another detail that made the situation even more disturbing. Despite weeks of searching, investigators had not found a single confirmed trace of Gus Lamont. Not a shoe. Not a piece of clothing. Not even the distinctive gray felt hat he had been wearing when he was last seen. According to statements from South Australia Police, none of the search teams uncovered physical evidence that could clearly explain where the child had gone. In open terrain like the outback, a child wandering away normally leaves some kind of trail. Footprints. Disturbed ground. Something that tells investigators which direction to follow. But in this case there was almost nothing. And the absence of evidence began to raise a chilling question. Had Gus Lamont truly wandered into the wilderness? Or had something else happened much closer to home? As the weeks turned into months, the disappearance of Gus Lamont slowly shifted from an urgent search operation into something far more complex. The large ground searches had ended, but the investigation itself continued quietly behind the scenes. Detectives reviewed timelines, examined evidence collected from the property, and spoke with the people who had been present at Oak Park Station on the day Gus vanished. Then, in early 2026, investigators made a significant announcement. According to statements released by South Australia Police and reported by ABC News Australia, the case was officially reclassified as a major crime investigation. The shift signaled a major change in how authorities were approaching the disappearance. Detective Superintendent Darren Fielka told reporters that investigators had identified inconsistencies in statements about the timeline of events and the movements of individuals on the property that day. These inconsistencies, he explained, were one of the reasons the case was now being treated as a potential criminal matter rather than simply a missing persons investigation. But the announcement carried another revelation that quickly drew public attention. Police confirmed that they had identified a suspect connected to the investigation. According to South Australia Police, the individual was a resident of Oak Park Station and someone who knew Gus. However, authorities made it clear that the suspect was not the boy's parents. The clarification was important, as speculation about the family had already begun to circulate online. Investigators emphasized that Gus's parents were not considered suspects in the case. Yet despite publicly acknowledging that a suspect existed within the circle of people connected to the property, police stopped short of making an arrest. According to officials, the investigation was still ongoing, and detectives were continuing to gather evidence and assess information. For many people following the case, the situation raised a troubling question. If investigators had already identified a suspect connected to the property where Gus disappeared, why had no one been charged? As the investigation deepened, another development began to draw attention from those following the case closely. According to statements released by South Australia Police and reported by Australian media outlets including ABC News Australia, cooperation from some individuals connected to the investigation began to change. In the early stages of the case, detectives had spoken directly with people present at Oak Park Station on the day Gus Lamont disappeared. Interviews were conducted as investigators worked to piece together the timeline of events and understand exactly who had been where during the crucial hours that evening. But as the months passed and the case was reclassified as a major crime investigation, that dynamic shifted. Authorities confirmed that at least some individuals connected to the case were no longer communicating directly with investigators. Instead, communication with police was now taking place through legal representatives. In practical terms, that meant lawyers had stepped in to act as intermediaries between certain people involved in the investigation and the detectives leading it. According to legal experts often cited in major criminal investigations, this kind of shift is not unusual when a case becomes more serious. Once the possibility of criminal charges exists, individuals frequently seek legal counsel before continuing to speak with police. Still, the change did not go unnoticed. In many investigations, the appearance of lawyers can signal that those involved believe the situation may carry legal consequences. Yet despite confirming this development, authorities remained extremely cautious about revealing further details. South Australia Police did not identify which individuals were now communicating through lawyers, nor did they elaborate on what specific evidence investigators were examining. The investigation continued quietly behind closed doors. And the growing silence surrounding the case only deepened the mystery of what might have happened at Oak Park Station that evening. Just as investigators were working through the complicated details surrounding Gus Lamont's disappearance, another strange piece of the puzzle began to attract attention. It involved a second missing person case. According to reporting from ABC News Australia, a man known publicly only as Benjamin disappeared on September 26, 2025. That was one day before Gus vanished from Oak Park Station. Details about Benjamin's disappearance were limited. Authorities did not release his full identity publicly, but investigators confirmed that he had been reported missing after unusual circumstances surrounding his vehicle were discovered. According to police reports cited by Australian media, Benjamin's blue Hyundai was later found abandoned in a remote area roughly 150 to 200 kilometers from Oak Park Station. The location was within the broader region where search teams were already operating during the effort to find Gus. Witnesses had reportedly seen the vehicle driving erratically before it was abandoned, though the exact circumstances of what happened to Benjamin after that remain unclear. South Australia Police addressed the situation directly during media briefings. Authorities stated that there was no confirmed link between the disappearance of Benjamin and the disappearance of Gus Lamont. From an investigative standpoint, the two cases were being treated separately. But for people watching the events unfold, the timing was difficult to ignore. Two people had vanished within 24 hours. Both disappearances occurred within the same vast and isolated part of South Australia. One was a 4-year-old child who disappeared from a sheep station. The other was an adult man whose car was found abandoned in the region not long afterward. Investigators maintained that no connection had been established. Yet the coincidence left many people wondering whether the two cases were simply an unfortunate overlap, or whether there was something about those 2 days that investigators had not yet revealed. Months after the large searches had ended and the investigation moved quietly behind closed doors, a new development began spreading across the internet. It was a short audio recording. According to discussions circulating through online forums and true crime communities, the clip featured a woman speaking in a trembling, fearful voice. The recording was brief, only a few seconds long, but the words quickly caught the attention of people already following the disappearance of Gus Lamont. In the clip, the woman appears nervous, almost whispering. Her speech is broken and hesitant, as if she is struggling to say something she is afraid to reveal. At one point she says she believes she may have seen what happened that day. Then she adds something that would send waves through the online discussions surrounding the case. She says what she witnessed happened close to the house. And then, in a phrase that many listeners found chilling, she says it was in the house. Throughout the recording, the woman repeatedly expresses fear. She asks to be left out of the situation and says she does not want anyone coming after her or her family. The tone of her voice suggests she is deeply worried about retaliation if her identity becomes known. The clip spread quickly across social media platforms and online discussion groups. However, according to South Australia Police, the authenticity of the recording has never been publicly confirmed. Authorities did not release an official statement verifying the identity of the speaker or confirming whether investigators considered the audio credible. Even so, the recording introduced a disturbing new possibility. Up to that point, the earliest working theory in the investigation had focused on the idea that Gus may have wandered away from the homestead into the surrounding outback. But the words in the audio pointed somewhere very different. Not out in the wilderness, but much closer to the house. As the recording continued to circulate online, many people expected investigators to respond. But that response never came. According to public statements from South Australia Police, authorities did not confirm the authenticity of the audio recording. At the same time, they did not deny it either. They simply said nothing. There was no official press briefing addressing the clip. No statement explaining whether investigators had examined the recording. No confirmation about the identity of the woman whose voice could be heard speaking in fear. The silence from investigators quickly became another subject of discussion among those following the case. In many high-profile investigations, police will sometimes address viral claims directly in order to correct misinformation or prevent speculation from spreading. But in this situation, authorities chose not to comment publicly on the recording at all. That absence of information left a vacuum. And when a vacuum appears in a case already filled with unanswered questions, speculation often follows. Online communities began debating whether the voice in the recording belonged to someone who had genuinely witnessed something disturbing on the day Gus disappeared. Others questioned whether the clip could have been fabricated or taken from an unrelated situation. Months passed without clarification. Then another claim began to circulate. According to a source described as being close to the situation, the woman believed to be behind the recording has reportedly contacted South Australia Police directly and provided information to investigators. However, this development has not been officially confirmed by authorities. Police have issued no press release about the claim. They have not publicly acknowledged speaking with the woman. And there has been no formal update explaining whether the recording has become part of the active investigation. If the report is accurate, it could represent an important moment in the case. But for now, investigators remain silent, and the mystery surrounding the voice in that recording continues. There are several reasons investigators might choose to remain silent at this stage of an investigation. According to law enforcement practices often discussed by criminal investigators and reported by outlets such as ABC News Australia, police will sometimes avoid public comment when a potential witness comes forward. One reason is verification. Detectives must confirm the identity of the person speaking and determine whether the information provided is credible. Another reason is safety. If the woman truly fears retaliation, investigators may limit public discussion to protect her and her family. Finally, silence can mean something else entirely. In major crime investigations, police often reduce public updates when they believe a significant lead may help them build a stronger case. Even after months of investigation, several troubling questions remain unanswered. According to details released by South Australia Police and reported by Australian media, the timeline of that evening still raises concerns. Why did nearly 3 hours pass before authorities were contacted? What caused the inconsistencies investigators later mentioned in statements about movements and timelines on the property? Why did police publicly identify a resident connected to Oak Park Station as a suspect, yet no arrest has been made? And what happened to the gray felt hat Gus was wearing when he disappeared? Then there is the voice from the recording. What exactly did that woman see? And if something truly happened inside that house, how did it go unnoticed? At the center of all these questions, theories, and investigations is a 4-year-old child. Gus Lamont was not a mystery or a headline on the day he disappeared. He was a small boy playing outside his home on a quiet afternoon in the South Australian outback. According to South Australia Police, he was last seen near the family homestead at Oak Park Station on September 27, 2025, wearing a wide-brimmed grey felt hat. Then within minutes he was gone. No confirmed trail. No physical evidence. No clear explanation. Months have passed since that evening and the investigation continues. Police have urged anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward. Because in many missing person cases, the smallest detail can eventually reveal the truth. Someone somewhere may still know what happened that day. And then there are the words from the recording that continue to echo through this case. It's in the house. If those words are true, the truth about what happened to Gus Lamont may have been hiding in plain sight. So now the question turns to you. What do you think the woman meant when she said, "It's in the house"? Do you think investigators already know more than they have revealed? Was this a tragic accident, or something much darker?